Welcome back to the third and final part of the base building tutorial. In this part, we're going to be going over freezing objects in place so that we can actually see from different angles what they look like, as well as being able to filter snap points. So if you don't want, for instance, a staircase to be able to attach to a specific point on your floor, then we're going to set that up, as well as being able to swap between which snap point you want to use. And that's how in the showcase, for instance, I was able to have a staircase going one way and then rotating and going the other way. So that's what we're going to be setting up today. And we're going to start with the freeze, because that's going to take 5 seconds and it's going to be very easy, and then it's out of the way. So inside of our AC tool, we're going to be adding our inputs. So in event graph, we're going to search for IA freeze. And once again, another Boolean, just like for the grid and for snapping. So duplicate that and we'll call it is frozen. Here we go. Set it to true on started and set it to false on cancelled and completed. Now, this won't work right yet because I forgot to add it to our mapping context. So in our mapping context, we'll just open it up right here and we will press the plus to add it, and we're looking for freeze. And I'm just going to use F, whatever key's fine, it doesn't really matter too much. So save that, and now our key will work. We just need to now freeze it. And to freeze it, it's very, very simple. Right before the event tick, we add a Boolean. Is it frozen? If not, we update. If it is frozen, well, we don't do anything. It's really that simple. So if we press 1 to spawn our ground here, and if we press F, it's... Oh, sorry, I made a mistake. We don't want to do it on holding. We want to just press it. So as it kind of gets annoying. So right here it's on holding. We want to do it differently. So we want to say on started, if it is frozen, right here, we want to set it to true, to false if it is, and back to true if it isn't. So just like this. And one other thing we'll do is in our spawn new build, we'll make sure that if we spawn a new build, we unfreeze the system if it is frozen. So we'll just set it to false automatically. So let's try that again. Press 1. If we press F, it freezes, and obviously it's no longer checking if it's overlapping with anything because, well, it's frozen in space. So right now it's not going to move, but I can still confirm its placement, and that works just fine. So that's the freezing. Completely done. It's that simple. The next step is going to be a bit harder, or a bit more stuff to do. So, and that is going to be the actual filtering system. And actually, you know what, first what we'll do is we'll do the swapping between the different elements. So we're going to use our A build and we're going to use our AC tools. So in our AC tools, we're going to need to get a new variable, and this is going to be called selected index, and this is going to be an integer. And we're going to need a second one, which is also going to be the selected integer, so to speak. And this is going to be the scrolled integer, as we're going to be using the scroll wheel to change the integer. It's going to be a different one here that we use. And so what we're going to change pretty much is that in our AC tools, it's right here, and we're looking for our build location, we're going to change this. Instead of being 0, we're going to change it to our new variable. For this, instead of 0, we're going to get selected index, and that's what we're going to use instead. So just line this up here, that as well. And there we go. Now we're going to have to do the same thing for these ones, but this one instead is not going to be our selected index. We're going to be using the counter, our scrolled integer, because this is the one that we're currently trying to use. So let's line this up. And obviously, because this is the rotation, we'll do the same thing here for our location. Now, if we run this by default, nothing should change because we're not changing this integer, and it's by default 0. And the same is going to be the case here as well, by default 0. So how we're going to do this is we need to change this. Well, sorry, this value is never going to change. And the reason it's not going to change is because once we place the item, we want to make sure this index is changed, I believe. No, not when it gets placed, sorry. We're going to call this here. So when we succeed or we change something, we need to know that we changed. And because how this works is this one will check whether we changed the snapping point, whether we're trying to move to another snap point instead. So on the actual actor we are hitting. Now, in addition to this, if the player decides to scroll to change which actor he is going to be using, or sorry, which snap point on the actor he is moving is going to be attaching with, then we need to compare this as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to add another one here, which is called OR. So if either we have changed our attach point on the fixed actor that we hit, or if we change the actor, if we change the snap point we're trying to use from the moving actor, then we need to know that. And so to check that, we're just going to see if this is different from our scrolled integer right here. Now, once again, by default, it's going to be 0, so it's not going to get called because it's the same. Now, to get these to change, we're going to make a function, or yeah, I think we'll make it no, I don't think we'll make it a function. We'll just collapse the nodes to make it more readable. Is we're going to make a change in our rotate here that handles if we're holding shift down. So the first thing to do is we need to check. So we're going to hold B and press to get a branch, and we're going to check is snapping. Now I'm just going to actually move the frozen there. And what we'll do on false, we'll plug in the actor rotation. Because in most cases, if we're attached anyway, we're not going to be rotating if we're trying to snap, because why would you want to snap the item to a rotate, or why would you want to rotate an item when it's snapped to an actual wall? What we'll do with this is we are going to drag this here, and this is going to be used as a reroute just because we want to collapse it because it'll be easier to use. We need a reference to what we're trying to make, so a build reference. To be fair, we can call that later, it's not necessary. And we need our scroll build, so, and we also need to know, sorry, which value we're using. Is it increment or is it decrement? So we're actually going to get this right here. I'm adding a few reroutes so it's easier to see. I'm going to check if it is superior to 0. And if it is, that means we are incrementing. So I'm just going to add another reroute, select both of these, and we're going to collapse the nodes so that it's more readable. This will be called modify counter. And let's just drag it slightly up. And there we go. So the input pin you can also change to increments that we know what it's for, and we will control double click to open it in another tab. Now inside of here, we need to do two things. We need to get a reference to our scroll integer, because that's what we're going to be changing, and we need a reference to our build because we need to know which snap point filter we're going to be using, or how we can increment based on this, because this is the max we can use. So we're going to add a branch right here. And if it's incrementing, then we add. If it's not, it's decrementing. So we go down. So we'll do decrement first. So we need another branch here. And what we're going to check is if our scroll counter is double equal to 0, then we can't go any lower. So what we'll do on false is we'll just increment, because that means that it is equal to 1, equal to 2, 3, 4. So we can go down by 1, no problem. So we decrement that right here. Now, on the other hand, if it is true that we're at 0, then we need to max it. So we're going to get our scroll integer here and say set. So drag it in and hold Alt to set the variable. And what we'll do is we will get a reference to this, to our build reference, and we need to know the last index. So make sure you use last index and not length, because length would need a -1 as well. So we'll just use last index instead. So we're going to copy this because we're going to need it for the superior. Because if it's superior here, then we need to check instead of 0 if it is equal to the last index. Because if it's the last index, we need to reset it back to 0. So we'll get our last index here, paste it, and we'll say if it's double equal to our scrolled integer, then that means that we are at the max. And if we're at the max, we need to set it back to 0. So drag in our scrolled integer, alt click to put it back, to put it as a set, and leave it at 0. And then for the other case, we'll just get another reference to our scroll and say increment, because we're at 0, 1, 2, 3, and we can keep going because it's not the last index. And now to finish things off, because we might want to add in something later, we won't be, but if you want to, then you need to make sure you attach all these outputs to the output pin, otherwise it won't understand that it is finished, or at least it won't continue the output. So I'm just doing it with some reroutes so it's easier to see. There we go. And that does it for our increment. So just to test if this is working correctly, in the event graph, in the event tick, we're just going to be adding a print to see whether our value is changing. And just to avoid having tons of stuff to avoid having tons of stuff on the screen, we're going to add a key. We'll just say integer, or int is fine. So compile, save, and now by default it will say 0, but if we scroll, nothing happens because we're not snapping 1, and 2, we don't have an item ready. So first, an item. If we scroll, it rotates because we're not holding shift. Now if I press shift, it'll scroll in between the values. Now, I think there's an issue, and I'm not sure exactly why this is. I've been having this issue for the past week or so. For some reason, every time I restart my project, my data assets lose all the transform information. And I'm not exactly sure why. So the reason this is allowing itself to scroll to minus, etc., is because it has no snap points. As you can see, we're holding shift here, but nothing is appearing. So I'm going to have to go and very quickly re-add those. If that's the case for you, I'm sorry, but you're going to have to do it as well again. But it only does it for the transforms. It doesn't do it for the actual asset, the actual static mesh itself. So I'm really not sure what's going on here. Now let's just save data asset so the information is saved. And let's run that test again. So if we do 1 and we press scroll, it rotates. If we do shift, they appear, so they're there again. And now if we scroll down, it goes to 3, 0, 1, from 3 all the way to 0, because those are the indexes. If we go up, same thing, no difference. It is stuck between those 4 points. So that does it for scrolling. That works just fine. We no longer need the print, we can get rid of it. Let's give it a try now with a build. So if we place 1 here and just we'll control to have it be aligned. Now if we hold shift and rotate, it's actually changing which point it's using. Now, as I mentioned before in I think the previous video, some points will have this result because that's the direction they are pointing relative to this point right there. So if we rotate again, this is another one. If we rotate another time, this is still not back to where we used to be. This one is, but they have almost the same value, so it's resetting itself back to how it was. But if we go back here, we're once again disoriented. So obviously this works for all of them. It will be similar in most cases for the square, but if we use, for instance, the actual staircase later, because we're going to be setting those up so I can show you the whole thing once the project is done, it won't have this issue because there's only 2 points and the 2 points are always facing 180, so they'll always be going out. It does work. We can actually switch between our different points now. And so, as I just mentioned, we're going to make a staircase now. And the reason we're doing the staircase now is because it's easier to see if we use the filter system with that staircase. So let's go and make our staircase. So drag in A builds, and we're going to actually need to make a new data asset first. So we're going to right click. We can always duplicate this, but we're just going to do it the proper way. Right click, miscellaneous, and look for data assets and look for DA blueprints, DA underscore staircase, or I call it long staircase because there's also a turning one. So there we go. Let's select our staircase. So long staircase right here, save, and there we go. So now with our data asset made, we can actually select it for this. So go into data asset used, long staircase, and if we do load, we now have the actual visual for the staircase. Now, next we just need our snap point. So first one, add it, and we're going to drag it all the way to the end here, and just check this direction is correct. Yep, that's all good. Add a second one, and the second one, it's better with numbers to place it. So it's I think it's minus 750 and plus 500 on the Z. Yep, that's exactly it. And we need to rotate it by 180 degrees because it needs to face the opposite direction. Now, if we just go and save this data asset, and then we can just delete this, we won't need it anymore. If we go into our tools, we need to have a way to place it. So we made our building map here. Now we just add that element. So we have map element 1. Now I want to add map element 2. And we can select our long staircase. So right now, if we go and place our long staircase, let's have a look. We can rotate it just like the other one, no problem. Now, if we go and now add number 1, and let's just place it, and let's say we do 2 to add the staircase, it snaps on just like the other one, always on the right side because the pivot point is right there at the middle. And if we rotate, it inverts it. Now, it's going to be difficult to see here, but you can see with the green outline that it is underground. And if we look here, it is trying to go underground. Now, it can't build because, as I mentioned previously, this is a very basic system to do the collision. So it kind of looks a bit bad here, I'm not going to lie. So normally, obviously you can't build here because it's going right through the ground, but it does indeed work for the rotation. If we rotate it again, it appears right here. And we can go up. Now, there's a problem with the collision here, so that's why it looks a bit weird or I can't jump on it. If we show collision, that's the collision we're dealing with, so it's not great. So we can go ahead and change that very quickly by selecting our static mesh, double-clicking on it, and we'll make something simple-ish. We could do it with a box, but I'm lazy, so we're just going to remove collision and say apply our convex here. And that will give it a kind of almost perfect look, but you can see there's a little glitch here and there, but it's fine for what we need to do here in the tutorial. So we'll just close this, and now if we do our 2 again, we should be able to actually climb on it properly now. Final step for the tutorial is we are going to add the filter system so that we cannot place the specific item that we try and filter out. So in this case, it's going to be the staircase. We cannot place the staircase on that specific pivot point. So let's get into it. So the first thing we want to do is we want a way to determine visually if we are modifying the snap point. So if the snap point is no longer valid. So to do that, we want to make another value here, and we're going to duplicate our mi yellow and call this mi red. And that's exactly what we're going to do. Open it up and change the color to red. And to make it work, we need to actually change our static mesh components. So in blueprints, static mesh snap, and we're going to make 2 functions, one called mark valid, and we'll just create it here for a second. We'll say set material, and the material we will use is the yellow mi solid, and we'll just duplicate this and we'll call it mark invalid. And instead of yellow, we're going to use the mi underscore solid, no, I can't write apparently, solid red. And so now we'll be able to switch between the 2 if we call this function. And to call that function, we're going to use the a build, and in the a build, we're going to make a very, very simple function, which is called update snap appearance. So update snap appearance. And to get this to work, we need one extra input, and that extra input is the filter. And that filter is going to be the type that we are trying to actually place here. So what we're looking for is a build. So a builds right here. Object reference, because it already is loaded, we don't need to worry about soft referencing here. So filter, we'll call it. And what we do is we do a for each loop through our snap point comps, or our components, and we're going to tell them if our snap point, so these snap points are linked to these 2 here as well. And so we're going to get our snap point information here and check which actors it's supposed to ignore, because that was the whole point of having our actual snap point filter use, instead of just a transform, we're using actual transform with an array next to it. And to be fair, the array could actually be a set instead of an array, but we're not going to go and change that now. So we're going to get a copy. So if you want to go, and set it to if you want to change the array to a set, that would be better, but it's not that important for this. It should be okay. It would be better as a set because we're not cycling through the information. We just want to know if it contains something. So what we're going to do is we're going to check if this contains the item. And if it does, that means that the snap point cannot be used. So which item does it contain? Well, we're looking for our get filter, just 1e, and it will appear all the way at the bottom here. So get filter, if we plug it in here, it won't work directly, but we can turn it into a soft reference. Sorry, no, I got that wrong. We don't want the filter to be this. We want this filter to be the DA blueprint, because we're going to use the actual blueprint itself. So, sorry, get rid of this, call filter again, because now it is a different value. And now it should plug in correctly and just immediately get transformed into the soft reference. There we go. Let's just line these up. And so now, if this is the case, that means that we cannot use it because it is supposed to filter out that item. So we will call this and say mark invalid. Plug that in here. And otherwise, we'll just add a reroute here and say mark valid. And that means that it will turn into the yellow that we're used to. Now, where are we going to use this? Well, we're going to use this in the most simple place we've already set up, and that is going to be in our update snap points, because this is going to only call when it's necessary. So we're going to call it here. We're going to let this know, I believe, no, sorry, not that one. Is it? Sorry, no, not this one. No, this one we do need, sorry. Let me keep mixing it up. This will allow us to show, so because it's showing, we need to know which build we're making and be able to filter via that. So we're going to say data asset used, so get our data asset used, and we're going to pass this through right here to our new function. So from our array elements, we're going to say filter, sorry, update appearance, I believe we call it, update snap appearance. And I just realized, unlike in my project, we always have a soft reference here. So we're actually going to change this into a soft reference as well, because that's what it's used for anyway. So select our filter, change the DA blueprint to a soft reference, and we'll just call it again here, get filter, all the way at the bottom, and just plug this in here. It's the same thing. The only difference is that we're using a soft reference because we already have a soft reference. Instead of trying to load it again, we'll just plug it straight in without any changes. So we want to copy this because we're going to do the same thing when we try and load them here as well for the newly hit items. And so plug this in right here, and that will give us the result we're looking for. Now, if we run the project right now, nothing's actually going to change because, oh, sorry, I need to plug that in here, array element, otherwise it won't work. If we run it right now, nothing will change. And the reason nothing will change is because we haven't actually done anything. We haven't told any items to be filtered out. So if we go and do that right here, we're just going to very simply go into our DA or our data assets, and in the floor, we're going to open index 0, and we're going to say we want you to filter the long staircase. So that means it will no longer be able to snap a long staircase to that point. At least it shouldn't be. Now, right now, we don't have anything to tell it cannot. We just have it visually. So right now, if we press 1, we have yellow on all 4 points. If we press Control, we'll just place it. If we press 1 again, we have yellow on all 4, and it's capable of snapping to all 4 points, no problem. But if I press 2 and hold Shift, normally the last one here is red because it cannot be attached here. Now, as I said, we haven't set up any blueprints to do the actual logic, but visually we can tell that one is not good. It won't work. So if we close this for now, let's get into making it not connect. Sorry, so I just remembered something we need to do as well, because currently right now this is running on a loop, I believe, because this is changing, but this isn't. So very quickly, just at the end of this, get a reference to our building and say set our, not our counter, I believe that's not what it's called, no. Set integer index selected index, sorry. And we're going to set it to our scrolling integer. So the last thing we need to do is we need to apply our filter to this transform, because this is what we're trying to attach to. We need to tell it, well, you can't attach to that. So how are we going to do that? Well, very simply, we're going to modify the function. So right here, we're going to add the filter in, and the filter is a new input, same DA blueprint. We're going to use the same thing as before, and we're going to say filter data asset. So compile, and now just go back to AC Tools so that we can get a reference to it. We want a building reference again, and we want our get data assets used. And we plug this into the filter, and now we have the information within our get closest transform to ignore a transform if it is supposed to be filtered. So we're going to open that up, and just like before, we already have most of our logic here. We just need to check if this can be called if we have a valid element, if an element is not contained within. So we're going to add a branch, and we're going to control drag to put it on true here. Or sorry, not on true, we want it to be on false because we want to only do this if it does not contain. So I'm just going to move this a bit further because we need a bit more space. There we go. And right here, we're going to add another reroute so that this is more readable. There we go. Right here, we need to drag this to false. I'm just going to add another reroute so that it continues kind of in the same line. There we go. So to get this to work, we need to check if this contains our input. So our input is called filter DA. So all the way at the bottom, filter DA, plug it in. If it does contain it, we don't want to use that point because it doesn't work. Now we can add a safety net here, although normally you should never have this situation, but in any case, we're going to add it anyway. So right here, we're going to add a safety net to say we didn't find anything because every item or every point was filtered out. So we need to get our distance, and we're going to check if our distance is equal to its default value. So make sure you copy your default value in case, because you might just miss a 0 and you might not notice. Now, this isn't too important because once again, it's a safety net that should rarely be used. So right here, we are going to say on fail, meaning we did find something, that we just return this. Now on false, what we'll return is we will remove that because that bugs out every time. Return node. We're simply going to return our actor transform. So get actor transform. So that just means it will attach it to the middle. So it won't actually be allowed to be placed, but we're well aware that this doesn't have a pivot that can attach to there. I keep saying pivot, but it's an attach point, not a pivot. So if we compile and save, normally, right now, if we place a normal cube here, a normal floor, and we do a shift here, we can place it on this side, we can place it on this side, we can place it on this side as well, but if I try and place it here, it won't work. It will keep trying to go to the other two sides because they are just as close, but actually valid. The last thing we can do to finish up the tutorial is let's make a small house. So let's set up the other assets we've brought in. That way you can play around with them, learn how the project works a bit more, and maybe make it into your own thing later. So we'll make a DA staircase, normal one. We're going to open it up just to change the actual staircase itself, the asset. There we go. Oh, I misclicked there. Staircase. That one here. Save it. And we're going to change the actual positions after. So duplicate this one again. And this one is going to be DA underscore wall. And then we have two extra ones, which are just decorations. So DA, I believe, table. And we'll just call the other one statue. Very basic statue I made in Blender. Like, it's just a preset, to be fair, but let's just call it that. So for wall, we're going to change it to wall. There we go. I'll save. And for table, same thing. Table. And the last one, statue, is going to be, I believe I call it statue, or did I call it something else? Let's look in our assets. I call it pyramid, so I call it pretty much what it is. Let's close that. And we can close all of these. They're not useful anymore. We've finished all of the code. Now it's just kind of playing around. So if you want to stop the video here, that's absolutely fine. But let's just make these ones just so everybody can play around with all the assets that are available. So select our new data asset. So we're going to select our staircase, our normal one. We're going to say load data assets. And right here, we're going to have to move these points. So the first one is going to be all the way back here. And is going to be rotated this way. So make sure the red is pointing, the X is pointing in this direction. And normally the coordinate should be 250. There we go, so that's perfect. And we'll take this one as well and move it all the way back here. And by default, it should be in the right spot as well. So let's just double check. At minus 250 we need, not 240. So orientation is already good here. Let's go and actually, sorry, I forgot. We do need to have it in AC tool because we need to add the different elements. So for 3, we're going to have our normal staircase. For 4, we're going to have our wall. For 5, we'll have our statue, or our table, sorry. And for 6, we'll have our statue. There we go. So, and there we go. So now they'll all be able to be added at runtime. So let's try adding this one first. So I will hope I saved that. Let's just make sure that we save data first. So Control-Z does work to bring it all back. And let's try, if we press 3, we do indeed have our new staircase. If we press 1 to add a floor and we press 3 to snap it to that floor, it works just fine. Now, once again, the collisions are bugged on this, so I'm going to have to fix it. And we got an error, apparently. The reason is because this got called even though the building isn't valid. So we'll just make a check here by doing right click on it, convert to validated, just plug that in here, and we'll have to do the same above as well because the same thing can happen there. So we'll just copy this and paste it and plug it in right here. So remove that one. This is just a safety. It can happen, I didn't think about it, but when you do close an actor, when you were doing a shift and moving, it could cause an issue here. So let's compile and save. And right here, let's go back to the next one. So A builds again, plug it in, or place it in the map, change the data asset to our statue. We don't really need to do table neither because we don't need them to have attach points. We're just going to place them based on their pivot point, which is on the floor. And for wall, we'll just add another one. So let's load it. And we're going to get rid of both of the points and add them again. Now, here we want it to be facing outwards. We're going to want a second one, which is also facing the same direction, but we want it at the top. So this is going to be right there. I think that's correct. Rotate it 180 degrees. And the next one, and make sure you do these ones correct, the next two. So we want it to be at 250 height on the Z, and I believe 250 on the X, if I'm not wrong. No, not 250 on the X, 250 on the Y. And we want to make sure that it is rotated correctly like this. Now, specifically for the fourth point here, which is also going to be at 250, but on the other side, so 250 here and minus 250 here, we want to make sure that it is pointing the same direction as the snap point. And the reason for that, unlike with our floor, the floor will always adapt and point in the same direction. It doesn't matter because floors attaching to each other look the same in any direction because it's a square. But in the event of attaching a wall here, we can't have it facing outwards because it would be attaching this point to this point. So they would be kind of inverting themselves and placing inside when we need to make sure they stay on the side of each other. So normally, if this were a floor, that's a showcase, we would want it like this. But here we want to do the opposite. We want to have them facing the same direction here. So like this. So make sure the red is pointed this way and the green towards the front. So save our data asset here and let's just test it out. I believe it was on 4. So if we place 4 here, we hold control. There we go, we have our wall. And if we put another one, if we hold shift here, we need to change which pivot point it's using. This works just fine. And if we go here, it's on the wrong one here. But if we scroll again, it goes to the right one. Obviously on the side, it's not going to look great, but on the it works just fine if we scroll and select the right one here. Same for the top. If we look there, we rotate. Oh, I think that's actually wrong. We need to change the rotation here because right now it's kind of looking the wrong way and we don't want that because we don't want it to be inverted. That's a bit stupid. So I think we have to do the same trick as with the bottom. So let's just drag it back in, or with the side, sorry, and we will load that data asset right here. So wall, load it in, and I believe we have to rotate this 180 degrees. Let's give that a try. Save data asset. Let's try again. So for number 4, we'll just hold control and we will add another one right on top. And that looks better, doesn't it? That's aligned perfectly. You can only see the seam because of my shitty UV unwrapping. But that does it. Now let's see how far we can go. Let's try and build. If we want, we can actually add this here. I believe if we rotate it, there we go. If we try and place a staircase, so let's place it there and rotate it. There we go. So we can actually climb up. Let's add a floor here as well. And now we have an actual second floor. Let's add a table. Let's add a little statue on the side. And this is now a nice working space. And let's add some other walls so it actually looks like a proper room here. So I think we're hitting this side more. There we go. Let's add another one here. And we're not going to close that off, obviously, because otherwise we can't get up. And let's try and add another staircase. Now with this staircase, we can actually make it almost infinite as well if we just didn't have the problem with the collisions. Like we can actually keep it going like that infinitely. So that does it for this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you got to learn everything you wanted. This part was kind of a bit shorter, but at the same time, I don't know how long it is because I can't see on my second screen. But I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned everything you wanted to learn about building snapping and base building with a snapping system, a filtering system, and being able to freeze them in place. If you want to get access to the project files, then feel free to check out the Patreon. It really helps me out, and I hope that the commented project files will help you out. So I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.